Good morning. First, I want to thank Angela Graff and Chosen Advocates for having me here today. I have been so inspired by the work Angela's doing, and to see God come into somebody's life and just light a fire in their hearts and see them fight so hard, because one of the things as a victim of child sex trafficking is that you feel like no one cares. And today, I'm inspired by everyone here because I can see that everyone here today cares. My story of becoming a victim is one that's all too common. I was born to a teenage mother. She was 17, pregnant, and an alcoholic. She married my father. This was during the 1960s. He joined the Army in order to pay for my birth and taking care of me. He came back from Vietnam, like many did, angry, frustrated, unable to deal with it. He started hitting my mother. My first memory as a 3-year-old is the sound of my father's fist on my mother's face. Of course, the marriage soon fell apart. My mother continued to drink. She found her reality at the bottom of a bottle. It wasn't long before she met a man that we thought would be the answer to our prayers. It started out as him hugging me, and before long, he began to molest me. Soon after that, he began using me for child pornography. He threatened my mother's life and told me no one would believe me. And so I stood between me and my mother and let him do that to me. Soon after that, he introduced me to the pedophile ring he belonged to. For my initiation into the pedophile ring, I was raped and beaten by all 10 members. My first time being trafficked as a child, at 5, I was handcuffed to a truck stop bathroom, raped, molested, and sodomized for 6 hours. This is all too common occurrence. This continued for 7 years. During those 7 years, I told 10 people, including an ER doctor. I was not believed. When I saw the ER doctor, I had 3 bruised ribs. I came back 3 hours later with 3 broken ribs. The doctor had told the person who had taken me there, my handler, that I was making up stories. And that's why the work Angela is doing is so important. We have to give victims a place where they can go where they feel safe. At the age of 12, I had lost all hope. I went to my mother's medicine cabinet. I took out a bottle of sleeping pills. I went to the liquor cabinet, took out a bottle of vodka. Went to my mother's rose garden, which she valued more than me. I downed the sleeping pills and downed the vodka and laid down on the warm, soft earth. I woke up in the emergency room. I had been dead for a total of 3 minutes. During those 3 minutes, I had an experience. I woke up on a plane of white fog. I heard a voice speaking to me. At first, I didn't recognize the voice, but then it dawned on me. It was my friend Steve, who I'd seen choked to death in front of me by the sex traffickers. He spoke to me and he said, "This is not your time. You need to go back and fight for all children and make sure not one more suffers as we have." I woke up to wide-eyed doctors, armed with God's word and the strength in my heart that has carried me to this day. At the age of 17, well, actually, after that point, I was put into foster care. Then at the age of 17, I went back. I sobered my mother up. I joined the United States Marine Corps and never looked back. This has been a road that's taken 40 years for me to get to. It took 40 years and 25 years of therapy. It's just such a hard thing to talk about, but with God and the strength of a good family, I am here today. Right now in this country, the number of children at risk for being trafficked would fill 1,300 school buses. That's 100,000 to 300,000 children. The average lifespan of a child being trafficked is 7 years. A child is forced to have sex 10 to 12 times a day, and a trafficker makes from $150,000 to $250,000 per child per year. This is a crime that's growing, and it's one that's very visible if we know how to look. Right now in downtown Denver, there are boys and girls being trafficked sexually, and I saw that yesterday. It's very easy to do something about this. Being here today is the start. If you learn the signs of human trafficking, learn the number for the human trafficking hotline, and call, you can save not 1, but 10 or more lives. You can also volunteer. Get involved with Chosen Advocates, what Angela's trying to do. She is really making a difference in the lives of victims and inspiring so many. And I just want to thank her for having me here today. And I want to thank all of you for what you're doing. And the other thing I want to say is that, there's one thing that we can do for our children that can protect them. Give them unconditional love. It is the inspiration, it is the power that will preserve and protect them even in their darkest hours. The signs that you want to look for in a child is someone who has no control over their lives. When you're being trafficked sexually as a child, you're typically malnourished. Different people show up to pick you up from school. Because one of the things I want to mention is that I was trafficked in school. I mean, I went to school every day, and I was trafficked after school, on the weekends, and during holidays, and I was often pulled out of school to be trafficked. I was a shell of a human being, but I was still being trafficked. And that happens more often than we know. And one of the other amazing facts is that, according to Covenant House, the recent numbers, 36% of child sex trafficking victims are trafficked by their own families. Now, this is something that occurs often. And we talk about, the FBI Innocent Lost Project, Operation Cross Country. Last year, they rescued over 160 children. More than half of those children were never reported missing. In LA County, 59% of the children arrested on the streets selling themselves were from foster care or CPS. And it becomes a conduit that we have to stem the tide of. One of the things that we can do also is educate and empower our children and all adults how to look for the signs. One of the things I say quite frequently is that human traffickers know exactly what the vulnerabilities are in a child, and they look for those. Let's show teachers, adults, and everybody else what these signs are, and rescue these kids before the traffickers can get to them. And I want to talk about something. I was talking to Susan Norris last night, and she was mentioning something that she had spoken to a human trafficker who has now found God, and she asked the human trafficker, what do you look for in someone that you want to begin to traffic? And he said, they're breathing. The fact is that they look for vulnerabilities. So if we can just strengthen our children and give them unconditional love and also teach them what to look for, we can save so many children. Over 76% of children are trafficked on the internet. Backpage.com. We had a really phenomenal ruling last week when 3 young girls won the right to sue Backpage in Washington State. These 3 girls were trafficked on Backpage.com. And Backpage has been hiding, cowering in the shadows. But now we're going to bring them into the light and make sure that they see justice. And also, we've been fortunate that MasterCard, Visa, and Bitcoin have refused to allow their services to be used for Backpage.com. And I'm so proud. I'm so happy to hear that. I'm so happy to hear that. Because the internet, of course, started out as a beneficial tool for us, but it gets exploited. And one of the things that I talk about, as you know, I'm a writer, is there is something called the dark web. The dark web is a set of non-indexed sites that is 500 times larger than the internet we surf today. It's accessed by an encrypted browser called Tor. Tor was originally invented by DARPA, one of the big think tanks, for political dissidents and for journalists in countries that were oppressed to communicate. But right now that's being exploited. Over 80% of the traffic on the dark web is pedophiles. Business Week reported that there was a crowdfunding site on the dark web set up by pedophiles to fund child pornography. Another individual who used to work for DARPA, now working for child abuse organizations, found a Craigslist type site on the dark web that was selling children. The youngest age requested for girls was 0, and the youngest age requested for boys was 1. So this is the depravity that we're fighting. It's a cat and mouse game right now, but the FBI and Europol, which is the UK's agency, are fighting this desperately. You know, we really have to understand that, and I want to say this, that we never want to say that anybody's not a good parent. What we want to say is that these individuals that are after our kids are ruthless and depraved and are like sharks 24/7 out to get children. The reason I got into this whole movement was Jerry Sandusky. My former life was as a basic scientist. I did research. But when Jerry Sandusky got put on trial, I said, he will not get away with this. I will not let these victims suffer anymore. So I've written all my life, and as I tell people, I love grammar, but it doesn't love me back. But I like to write. And so I wrote an article that I sent out to various media outlets, and it was picked up by the Washington Times. And they said, we'll publish this as a one-time thing. And I said, great. Well, the article did so well, and the article was entitled "An End to Silence," because I said, this wall's coming down. We're not going to be trapped behind this ever again. So they published the article, and it did so well, they offered me a column, and I said, I'll write this column only if I can advocate for children. So I started writing it, and eventually my editors moved on and started their own news organization, which is where I write now. And so I've been very blessed to be able to advocate for children and meet so many amazing people during my work. And I work with the adopted son of Ronald Reagan, Michael Reagan, and I like to tell his story because it really highlights how vulnerable kids can be. Because here's, someone whose father's, the president, his mother was Jane Wyman, but Michael was molested and used for child pornography by an after-school counselor, and kept that secret. And I tell people, I'll say, whatever your view might be on Ronald Reagan, I tell a story when Mike told his father that he was molested. Ronald Reagan said, "Where is he? I'm going to go kick his backside." And I said, that is respect right there for doing that. But I think as parents, we really want to make sure that our child never feels a moment of pain. I understand that. And I think that, we can really work to educate and empower them with the knowledge. And I say the biggest healing force in my life has been my children. Unfortunately, as victims and survivors, we spend a lot of time blaming ourselves because that's what these individuals do, these predators do. They trap you in a prison of silence and really put the blame on you for this happening. Because one of the biggest excuses, and this is in the FBI manual for law enforcement, is sexual predators and pedophiles will say it's the child's fault, which you all know is ridiculous. The average pedophile molests 122 kids. And by the age of 15, they've already molested a child. And it's just one of these things where we have to protect our kids from these individuals and educate and empower ourselves and let our kids know that if anyone comes near them, goes in their private space, kick, scream, fight, get away in any way you can. I just want to say that I stand here today not only as a survivor, but a living testament that there's a hope and light inside all of us that no one can extinguish. And I want to say to all victims and survivors, number one, I don't care how many people tell you you're worthless, you're not, and that there is hope inside you, and people like Angela and myself want to help you find that hope and that light and kindle that into a flame, because the best thing that you can do as a survivor or a victim is go out and speak about your story, because it inspires people, and we really want to bring more people into this. And the more eyes that we have on this problem, the quicker we're going to solve this problem. We really have to talk to our legislators. We have to help the medical community get educated. A recent study said that less than 10% of doctors in this country know how to recognize a human trafficking victim. The ER doctor I saw had no clue. This was the 70s, but still, the emergency room is probably the only place besides the juvenile justice system that you're going to be able to actually help male victims. Ohio recently passed a law that requires cosmetologists to take an hour of human trafficking training because hair salons, nail salons, and massage parlors are three of the big areas where you're going to find victims. Airports. Delta has taken a tremendous step in supporting human trafficking activists. They have a display set up at Atlanta Hartsfield Airport, and I hope they will do the same at the Denver Airport to educate people about human trafficking. Kids are trafficked through airports right now. They're being trafficked through airports. Hotels. Hilton Hotels did the amazing thing. They banned porn from all their hotels. And I just applaud them, and I'm so happy they did that. They've been a real advocate for that, so thank you, Hilton. The scope of the problem can be overwhelming, but we have to focus on the small steps. Education, empowerment, and volunteering. And I always tell people that if it's in your heart, that is the most powerful tool that you can have. Because just knowing, as a victim, just knowing that someone cares is the greatest gift that you can ever give a victim. And we have to really help victims as well when they get out of the life, which is what we call being trafficked, because the hardest thing in that process is to teach a victim how to love themselves, because they've been conditioned to believe that selling their bodies is all they're good for. And believe me, I felt that way at a lot of the time as well. But you have to show them the beauty that's inside as well as outside, and give them that encouragement and guide them through that process and help them heal. And I will tell you, I have seen so many victims rise up, go to college, get educated, become empowered, and help others. And there's no greater thrill for me to see that. I have, in my own life, I've been contacted by around 5 victims who have helped get into safe houses and help them heal. And I feel really honored. Typically, when you're a victim, you're deathly scared of law enforcement. I mean, one of the things that happens when you're being trafficked is that you're told that, they're going to lock you up. And that's why we need safe harbor laws. We need to have safe harbor laws so victims aren't treated as criminals, and they're given the care and the help and the understanding that they need to heal. Because it's one thing to get somebody out of being trafficked, but keeping them out is the real trick, because you've got to really help them discover the beauty inside themselves, but also make them see, that they can do something else with their lives. Coming from dysfunction like I did, it takes a lot to overcome. And I've been real blessed to have God come in my life and guide me through that process. And I wouldn't be here today without him, and he inspires me every day. And I will say that also as a victim, this will affect me my entire life, but it will no longer define me. And it's all in those days that I struggle with the past that people like everyone in this room and Angela Graff inspire me and get me through that day. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, Jerry Sandusky was the assistant coach at Penn State who ran a charity for economically challenged kids, and he used that charity as his own personal hunting ground for kids. Jerry Sandusky molested kids for over a decade, and he could have been stopped at many points in that process, but he wasn't, because people did not act on what they were being told. we need mandatory reporting laws. I think that helps people because, a lot of times people have a problem coming forward. And it's unfortunate we have to put those in place, but we need mandatory reporting laws to make sure people understand that they need to speak about, they need to talk about this because, we have to protect our children. And, Jerry Sandusky is all too common. I mean, and I wrote an article after Sandusky was put in jail because, I speak about these individuals just to give an idea. I've never spoken to a attorney general, district attorney, detective, anybody involved in dealing with sex offenders that has seen them show remorse for what they did. Jerry Sandusky was writing love letters to his victims from his prison cell. And so he is, and one of the things that I became really afraid of is that when people saw Jerry Sandusky go to prison, that all the pedophiles were off the streets. And so I wrote an article and I said, well, you know what? Hey, what if Jerry Sandusky, his first victim had never come forward? And what if Jerry Sandusky moved next door to you? And what if Jerry Sandusky offered to babysit your kids? Would you know? And so that's why we educate and empower ourselves. And I always tell people that in this country, the numbers are that a child has to tell an average of 7 adults before they're believed. The first victim of Jerry Sandusky to come forward went to his high school principal and said, Jerry Sandusky is touching me inappropriately. And the high school principal said, what do you want to get Jerry in trouble for? He's a good guy. So we face those barriers. I spoke at a child advocacy center, and the local sheriff, who was thankfully voted out, was requiring kids reporting child abuse to take a polygraph test. And I just cannot think of a better way to keep kids quiet and in the grip, in the grasp of an abuser than to do that. So we have to believe our kids. We have to believe anybody who's a victim of sexual assault. We had a discussion last night about, why would anybody come forward and admit to being a victim of sexual assault? Because that whole process of coming forward is just so difficult and so hard. I mean, I'm very blessed that I can tell my story, because there was a point in my life where I had to decide either I was going to have the nightmares or the nightmares were going to have me. And I decided that I was going to have the nightmares. I would wake up screaming in the middle of the night, feeling people's hands around my neck, choking me, because one of the things that happens while you're being trafficked is people like to choke kids out. I mean, they would choke us unconscious. And I saw several people who were choked to death. So we have to get better at finding these kids. And just real quick, some stats on male sex trafficking. The John Jay College of Criminal Justice found that over 50% of the boys are being trafficked. And we're just scratching the surface on that. There are a lot more out there that I stand here today, encourage them to come out and speak. This is not a gender, socioeconomic, ethnic, or any kind of problem. It's a human problem. And we all need to unite together to try and find a way to educate and empower and protect our children. And we can do it. I know we can. I just know that the people in this room today, when you leave and you start talking about this, it's gonna inspire people to come into this cause and fight. And I know that we can all work together and bring an end to human trafficking. And I just thank you so much for being here today and inspiring me with your dedication. And thank Angela Graff for having me here to speak and for inspiring me and really showing me what God can do in someone's life. Thank you so much.